And I am excited to talk to these two guys that we have here today. And I'm excited for everyone to be able to pull some major insights. But ultimately, before I get into the intros of the fellas that we have with us today, as always, I just wanted to start a little bit by talking about Motion and what we are all about. So Motion is the hub of creative strategy. We focus on analytics and reporting. And what that essentially means is that creative has become the most important element of all of your paid advertising efforts. But what that also means is that we have, on one hand, our performance teams, so our media buyers, and on the other hand, our creative teams. Performance people, very analytical. Creative people, exactly that, very creative. So there's this natural gap that's created between both of them. So when we talk about the hub of creative strategy, what we're really focused on is this workflow between the teams that's ultimately melding the two sides of the brain to come together. And how Motion helps make this a lot easier is that we focus on the creative strategy flywheel to tell the story, and we make it really easy for you to analyze, visualize, and then share those insights off to everybody and anybody who's involved in that process. So that's the first thing when it comes to Motion. And a couple of housekeeping pieces before we kick off today. So the very first thing that I like to share is if you have any questions, please throw them into our chat. And then the other thing I like to highlight is anyone who's with us, we have a great community. So if you have insights or feedback to share, also throw that into the chat. Love to know what you have going on. And then the final thing that I wanted to note is that the recording will be made available after this call. If you have friends who couldn't join today, make sure that they're registered for the event so they can get that recording ultimately. So that's a little bit about Motion and ultimately the housekeeping. But let's get to the actual meat and potatoes of what we have going on today. And what we're here to chat about is how to make TikTok creatives that convert with these two guys right here. So these two guys are a couple of dudes that I respect definitely in the game. I know Olly and I have been chatting for quite a bit of time, but if you're not sure who they are, get a little bit of context. Olly, we got to get him a new headshot at some point, but Olly's the man. He's the co-founder of For You Advertising. He builds brands from the ground up, helps scale them from 8 to 9 figures, and ultimately has had 7+ years in the game. So if you haven't seen him on Twitter, give him a follow. He's sharing expertise always. On the other side of things, we have Loukas. So Loukas is the creative director at For You, but he's also the founder of his own agency, Hambia Media. And what they're focused on is creating performance creative, primarily on the meta side, but performance creative themes and concepts basically have a through line to everything we do. And Loukas has also been in the game for around 7 years-ish. But before diving into the agency world, I was talking to him before this. I was talking to him about it before the call. But he mastered TV and film. So getting into the world of what we'll call brand, but ultimately understanding visual concepts and having that flow through his blood. So guys, welcome to the party. Everybody in the chat, let's welcome these guys. We're excited to chat. We're excited to see what they have to say today and answer these questions. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. Looking forward
to having us. Awesome. So guys, before we start talking about like everything and anything like detailed wise creative strategy, I'm just curious, Loukas, I'm going to throw this to you first, just with like the creative strategy background. Like, what does creative strategy mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think like the lines, as you kind of touched on at the start there, the lines have become very blurred between media buying and creative strategy. I think nowadays, to be a good media buyer, you have to be a creative strategist. You know, creative is the most important variable in any ad campaign. So it's incredibly important that you know that and you understand everything from a creative perspective. I think it's like using data to optimize performance through the creative and using that data to turn into tangible insights that can not only, you know, be used to repurpose creative, but then also use it as ideation for new concepts and new directions.
I love it. And then Olly, so you've been hands-on keyboard for a while. You've seen it all when it comes to media buying, as well as trained up different team members. Why is it now more important than ever for creative to be data-driven?
I think as the platforms, you know, ever since iOS 13.5, I can always get the number wrong. Ever since then, the trend has been towards kind of broader targeting, more hands off in terms of granularity in ad accounts and giving more controls to these platforms. Obviously, data loss, and that trend's going to continue, I think, and that creative is more and more driving your targeting and supporting with reaching the right customers. So optimizing it to attract the right customers, so make sure that it's stopping people in the tracks when they see it on the feed, in a world where you're fighting for attention with tons of different advertisers on tons of different platforms, and then ensuring that when you've got their attention, you're taking them through a journey so that you can keep that, and then driving them to an action with a clear call to action, then kind of optimizing across all of those different elements to knit together a really solid piece of creative is what's really just going to drive you throughput from that awareness to the purchase that you're looking for, or the lead that you're looking for. By being data driven, you can do that more efficiently. You can incrementally improve that over time, and you can also keep your costs down, where you're not having to just throw things at a wall and hoping for results. You can actually get better, which is the key thing that data provides, I guess.
Entirely. And I like how effortlessly you start talking about it in terms of almost building that funnel. So it's like the awareness first, getting in front of the right person, driving them to the website and taking that action. One of the things I started this conversation with was talking about the natural disconnect that exists between like our media buying arm and our creative arm. So what I'm curious about is, Olly, you can effortlessly speak about it, but Loukas, in your world, being that creative person, how and what are some steps that you've taken to ultimately get closer to understanding the data so you can make some of the similar decisions that Olly and people like him will start to talk about?
Yeah, it's true. So obviously, yeah, from mine and Olly's side, we came from different ends of the spectrum and have kind of met in the middle. And I think in terms of that, you know, when we're kind of training our creative strategists, and for me, when I was obviously had to become more data driven when we were performance marketing, we kind of firstly have to analyze the creative and what those creative benchmarks are. What are the KPIs? What are those metrics that we need to be looking at? It's then kind of deeply understanding those metrics. So what is thumb stock ratio? What does it mean? What is a good thumb stock ratio? You know, understanding those benchmarks and building SOPs around that, so the creative strategists know. I think then it's like taking that data. And what we do is then obviously we build reports through Motion, and then we're, bi-weekly or bi-weekly, our media buyers are taking that data and then turning that into tangible creative insights. And then our creative strategists are able to see those individual metrics, see the insights that the media buyers pull from that are more data driven. And then as a result, they're learning why that data has turned into that insight. And then they take that and they're able then to use that to build the inspiration for the kind of the optimization that they're going to be proceeding with.
Fantastic. And I really love that you gave the granular example. Sorry, go ahead, jump in, Olly.
I was going to say, I think like creative strategists have naturally been pulled down into the media buying or up into the media buying, and then the media buyers have naturally been pulled the other way. So it's like we train media buyers to have that creative strategy mindset. We train creative strategists to have that media buyer mindset, because that data is important, and it really works if both sides can kind of look at the numbers, pull insights, and they're not over reliant on one or the other. And they all understand it and all can come together to drive performance forward.
Because once upon a time we had like a disconnect between the two, and there was no kind of communication loop as to, from a granular level as to what that meant. It was more just without any kind of explanation or context. So I think, when you are looking at creative on such, a macro level, and also just really kind of granularly, when you're then reporting on that weekly or bi-weekly, and there's direct correlation between how data influences an insight, it really trains the strategist to understand the thought process of the media buyers, and understand how that insight is developed.
Most definitely. And honestly, like Loukas, I love how you shared a specific example talking about thumb stop ratios, because really the through line whenever I chat with creative teams is around, okay, you need to know some of the metrics that are most important to you, but not all of them in the same way. So it's isolating them down so that story gets easy. But guys, before we talk anything about metrics, what I wanted to draw it back to was a little bit of the flywheel that I'd shown everybody a little bit earlier. So this one that we have right here. So before we even get to the point of like, we have creative live and we're looking at the data, where we like to start and think about this process as is actually determining like, what the heck is going on and what do we ultimately do? So Lucas, a follow-up question that I have for you is like, when you're conducting research, like where are you typically looking to get caught up and just up to speed on what's going on there?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think we've got quite an in-depth process when it comes to research. You know, we basically, firstly, you know, if we're working with a brand, once we've kind of got the onboarding questionnaire and got all of that relevant information, I mean, in most cases there it's fairly vague and you don't get a whole lot of information provided. Sorry, can you hear me?
Got you. It's a little bit frozen, but we hear your voice.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
There, to be honest. Oh, he's gone.
One of the things about the online world, it's all good. It's great that we have Olly. Are you able to jump in and talk about like research and where to kick off?
Yeah, I'm probably going to come at it from. Oh, he's back. Oh, is he back?
Apologies. Yeah. Internet just decided to drop. He's back. Worst possible moment.
It's all good.
Go on, carry on. I was going to jump in, but you go.
Yeah, so like I was saying, obviously when we're provided with an onboarding questionnaire from most brands, they're most of the time they're very vague. So, you know, we kind of go through a very in-depth brand alignment and research process, you know, internally with our team to make sure that we're fully aligned on the brand, and also kind of how we can look at it and digest that information in slightly different ways from what they provided, you know, as a foundation. So that obviously involves, you know, firstly, we're looking at the ad account data. So what right now is the data telling us? You know, what are the best performers? What are the best hooks? What are the best angles? You know, is there anything we can take from that that's going to mean that we're not going in blind? Then we're looking at, you know, positive and negative reviews. Like what are the customers saying about the product? You know, then looking into the social channels, what are people commenting on the post? You know, all of this information can help, you know, build really tangible insights that we can use within our research doc. You know, we're then looking at the actual kind of competitors. So what are the competitors doing well? What are they not doing so well? What is their kind of you know, top of funnel looking like? And you know, what kind of creatives are they running? I think there's a lot you can do there to also see how long they've been running creatives for. So, you know, typically if a brand has been running a creative for a longer period of time, it's clearly working for them. You know, we're going very deep into, you know, the brand alignment side. So tone of voice, we're going deeper into brand expression as well, brand strategy, and then obviously, you know, what's really, really important from all of those insights, we're then building customer personas. So really, really in-depth personas that you know, help just give direction to who the different personas are for that brand. You know, their brands can solve different problems for different people, so it's important that we separate them, understand them, and, you know, then create content around those specific pillars.
I love it. I love it. And then with this process and talking about onboarding, conducting this research, ultimately building those personas, who owns it?
As in who's kind of conducting that research?
Who's conducting the research? Who's owning the overall process to maybe like pull in an Olly to get some of that account information or whatever it might look like?
Yeah, so from a media buyer's side, you know, in terms of kind of pulling that and auditing the current ad account and pulling that data, the media buyer be running that. In terms of you know, auditing the competitors, that will come from the creative strategists, and also then the account manager is helping tie all of that together. But predominantly it's a team effort, I think, is really, really important. So we make sure that our research sessions, because there's obviously from a media buyers and creative strategist perspective, there's, you know, you can bring different value in different ways. So that research doc is typically kind of built out by the whole team, but just specific elements are built out by, say, the media buyer or the creative strategist.
Cool. And then Olly, on your end, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's crucial. Like everybody has different viewpoints. They're picking up on different cross sections of markets. They're consuming different content themselves. Their feeds look different. Like I think all of those insights, this process is best run when it's very collaborative. And then once you've got to the actual execution piece, then you get into your buckets and your lanes of, right, I'm gonna own this task and I'm gonna do this. But the ideation is a very collaborative process throughout.
It's great. And with all this information, because it's coming from all over the place and talking about like a meeting to bring everyone together, where does it start to live? So you have that competitor insight, you have the ad account information, you have these personas. Is it all aggregated into a single location, or how do you think about it?
I think,
Yes.
so, go on, you go. I was going to say there's two ways to do it. There's obviously brand side and agency side. I think if you're talking from an agency workflow, it's like moving that into a project management flow. I guess that's the same on both sides. From a brand side, it's kind of coming together, having a very structured meeting of ideation, taking that meeting forward, taking those specific concepts and moving that into a project management workflow that can be worked through. It's somewhat similar on the agency side. I'll let Loukas pick up from there.
Yeah, exactly. So we've basically got a template that we use. It's our brand alignment research and content strategy doc. So within that, as I said, we're building all of that ad account data. We're building the personas, the competitor analysis, positive and negative reviews, the social audit, etc. And then we're kind of condensing that into a deck that can then be externally facing to the client. I think what's really important is because we're building a lot of insights based on like a foundation and from our own learnings, and making sure that, what we're doing is going to be able to convert. Because I think there's always kind of a bit of a battle that you play, that like the brand owner has this real vision for what they want the creative to be, and they're quite protective over that. But it's about finding the balance of, conducting and bringing that vision to life, but then also using theory that is going to convert as an actual ad creative.
The marrying of the theory, the data, and everything is always the fun part, right? Which is honestly the perfect transition, because you've done all of this work to build out your personas and say, who should we actually be going after? The next thing that we start to think about is like, what the heck do we actually make? You know what I mean? So the very first question that I have, Loukas, maybe I'll toss it into your court and feel free to toss it to Olly after. It's just like, how are you determining what to make? Feel free to share your screen, or I can continue maintaining, whatever you like.
Sorry, you broke up just before you said about the share screen.
Oh, how are you determining what to make once you have these personas and go after them?
Yeah, so once we've got the customer personas, we have ideas on, the angle, what their key competitive differentiator is compared to obviously their competitors. We then, look at, we've basically built framework cards of best performing frameworks that we know work for different markets. Do you want me to share screen and I can
Sure.
go through quickly?
Let's do that.
Cool. So then, firstly, what we'll do from an ideation perspective, because I think what's really important is like, obviously it's you want to start categorizing ideas, but what we like to do is just have a real brainstorm where it's like anything goes. Just throw as much as you can at the wall and let's just get it all onto a piece of paper before we start like trying to be too particular about ideas, because I think you'll find there's a lot you can then pull from things later on. Once we've then built specific ideas based on different personas, different angles, and obviously each persona is going to have an after state, when the product is brought in as a solution, what is the after state of that person? What is the pain point that we're trying to tap into through that? We can then be able to break those ideas into those personas. And then off the back of that, we've basically got this database here that we've built out, which is just loads of winning frameworks that we've used. We obviously, we follow the AIDA framework for most of our creative, but again, that's a very broad framework. So attention, interest, desire, and action, to make sure that content converts. So obviously attention, comes down to obviously thumb stop ratio. So, how quickly can you stop that person from scrolling? How much can you gain their attention? And then interest obviously is when you're talking about the before state, you're tapping into the pain points. You're agitating those pain points before we go into desire, which is then introducing the solution, which is the product, and then using the USPs to back up that the product solution. I think what's really key there as well is, a lot of the time I see creative that they're bringing in USPs that aren't relevant to the actual pain point. Obviously, different products have different solutions that they're creating, and then the USPs are linked to those specific pain points. So, and I see quite a lot, too many things being thrown in a creative, and as a result, there's too much like mental cardio, too much going on. And I there's this phrase in filmmaking that I learned at film school called killing babies, and like sometimes you have to kill babies, and you have to just simplify it as much as you can to just one key USP that links to that pain point, and then obviously action, which is the call to action at the end of that video. So then that's a very broad framework. But then what we found, and as we've become more data driven in our approach and almost more scientific in our approach, is we've taken our best performing creatives across different markets, different niches, and then we've broken them into clear frameworks for our creative strategists to utilize and be able to use the ideas to bring into those frameworks. So as an example, this is one framework, pain hook solution. So, it gives key industries that this would work well for, gives a description of that framework. How does it work? And then I think this is what's really key here, is that we're then breaking down that framework. So we've got the attention and the hook. It's got the amount of time we sit on that hook for, based on that best performer. It's got the type of shots that it's using. What is the audio? So in this case, it's like that AI TikTok voiceover. It's got an example of the script that you would use. So if your girlfriend gets bad, and then pain point, and then the visual description. But I think what's great is that we're like taking a very scientific approach to and again, it's like anything, there's not a one size fits all. It's not like this is going to be a best performer necessarily for another brand. There's a lot of variables involved, but it really helps building these frameworks, and helps build direction when we're building them briefs for our creators.
I think just to build on that, in terms of like when brands are looking to activate, whether it's TikTok or even UGC on Meta, leaning into these frameworks, like you only have to find 1 to 3 concepts that work to really get scale on the platform, and then just really iterate on those concepts on a granular level. You don't need to be trying to do 10 concepts to appeal to 10 different personas. You need to go really deep in understanding, right, what are the 3 main reasons people buy? How do I stoke that desire even more effectively in my creative? How do I make that message clearer? Then how do I align that to post-click experience? And then that is what will bring you efficiency. And then just changing small elements, say hooks, or like even voiceovers, first frames, can get you to sort of 5k 10k a day and spend for some, if you've got kind of large market. So yeah, just kind of going deep on those core angles.
Yeah, I think this key, like a lot of creatives try and they just want to keep reinventing the wheel, innovating, which is obviously important. But I do think there's like an 80-20 rule where you want to be testing, if you've got winning concepts that are working, just iterate on those concepts. There's loads of tactics you can use to creative that maybe has fatigued. You can bring it back to life. You can green screen over the top of an old creative that has been a best performer. You can use a best performing hook and put it into a comment reply. There's loads of things you can do to iterate on those creatives or improve them even more, even down to hold rate, like can you cut it, more sharply, things like that.
When we start to get to the data, there's so many ways we can look to understand it and then start to break it down. To dive back to the screen that you were sharing there, Loukas, a little bit around frameworks. First thing, just wanted to align on definition wise, because I know, Olly, you spoke about concepts and then we were talking about frameworks. Are they interchangeable at that point, or does one filter into the other?
I call them like macro concepts, yeah. Or I guess you can change them out, yeah.
Okay, sweet. And then the follow-up that I have is, Loukas, you had described just giving an opportunity for everyone to just throw it at the wall. It's like, let's be free with it, and then we'll go ahead and align it with personas. So if someone's running that meeting, essentially, are they detailing out everything you had shown in that card? So breaking down 2 to 4, so on and so forth. Or is it literally just starting with that high level concept or framework before diving in? I'm seeing some head nods.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's literally like anything goes. Let's put frameworks, complexity aside, and let's just chuck some ideas around, before then you kind of start taking that into building those ideas or concepts into an actual framework, scientific framework that works.
I love it. I love it. And then the last follow-up that I have on that one is when it starts to come to decision time and say like, okay, we've thrown some stuff at the wall, or not at the wall, but just like we have it out there, determining where are we going to lean into at that point? How do you start to prioritize exactly where you and the team are going to focus?
I think it comes a lot of the time down to like just experience and the data of what we're running ads at scale across several agencies. So from that, we're doing like weekly trend reports internally, insight reports across all of the brands that we're working on. So that normally helps align like what we're going to prioritize at that point in time. Like certain things may be working better than others,
Gotcha.
such as relationship angles just as an example. So we may then double down there and see how we can build ideas around just that kind of macro concept of relationships or gifting.
Gotcha. And then last one I have, I know I said that was last, but I was curious about it now. Olly, when it comes to the decision-making process around here, so everyone's contributing in different ways, is there a single owner who's required to push this forward? Or is it literally a team decision of when you're starting to determine what to create?
In terms of going from ideation to like prioritization.
Exactly. Prioritization and ultimately briefing it out.
I think it's a bit collaborative, to be honest, in the way we work. Like, I think the creative strategist and the media buyer both have, if there's existing data, it's worth kind of accounting for both. I think that cross section across accounts is again quite a unique position from an agency perspective that is harder to do from an in-house brand perspective. And I guess we don't have too much of an ICE prioritization or anything from like a rigid, like we're going to score this against impact, confidence, effort. We could put that in place, but I think it's more just a natural process from our viewpoint that we have that experience and that cross section, like I mentioned, to know kind of where to start and what to prioritize.
I love to drill there because like ultimately creative is so human at the end of the day, right? So it's like, that's why it's harder to impact, confidence, ease it, or whatever it might be at that point.
I guess one area that we do that helps with that decision making process, if a lot of the brands we work with are at like sort of 7-8 figure scale, like they are brands that they usually have again 1 or 2 angles or 1 or 2 pain points that are worth kind of delving into first, or they might have tried something on another platform from it. Like they're not starting from like square one. So it's like lead into what's worked first and then kind of try and optimize that and then start branching off that, look for those quick wins and that efficiency rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and then build off that.
Fantastic. Okay. So at this point, we've talked about the research and everything that's required to understand what has gone on. We've talked about ideating. So we have personas. What should we actually make to make sure these people buy or try to entice them to buy? Now, the next step here is you've done great work. Now we need to hand this off to actually be shot or made or edited. Let's talk about briefing now. How are we making sure that we're translating all of this gold that we've mined into actionable steps that ensure you get back what you need? Who's best to take this one? Loukas, throw it at you to kick off.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. I can actually just run through one of our briefs.
Technology, best friend and worst enemy.
Can you see my screen?
Yep, we got you.
Cool. So yeah, I think what's really important with briefing, and we've like tested a lot of different ways of doing this. And again, we've built in a new briefing process probably in the last like 3 months that is working far better. Again, we've got really good relationships with all of our creators and we ask for feedback consistently. So seems to work really well. We've like tried different things, building briefs in more visual ways like decks. And although that's great, what we found in those cases is that when you've got 30 plus slides, it's actually rare that a creator is going to actually read the whole thing. And it became a bit problematic because a lot of key information was being missed. So we tried to like look at how we could simplify briefing as much as we can. And I think as well, like we've also gone back and forth on the idea of how much do you give the creator? I think what's really important is that if you're working with creators, they deserve to have a level of creative freedom to some extent. I think if you put them within a box too much, it just, it's a shame because there's been many times where we've given briefs to creators and they've brought really interesting ideas that they've built on, you know, to add another dimension to the creative. And if you're putting them too much in a box and scripting everything word by word, one, it doesn't come across authentic to them because it's not necessarily the way they would talk, and two, you know, it doesn't give them any opportunity to like push the ideas further and, you know, use their own creative expertise. So I think we use a very similar framework to when we're building out those frameworks. So clarity on each step of that framework, which I'll go through in a moment, but then just giving some light direction to each part of that video so we know exactly that we're getting the shots we need and giving the direction to that. And, you know, it's like when you're directing an actor, it's key that like you don't tell them, here's what you say. And you know, the one thing is like you don't kind of, you're not supposed to act it back to them. You're supposed to use, you know, you're supposed to kind of describe the feeling and get them in the thought process so then they can act it out themselves. And I think you know, it follows a very similar way to how we would brief. So I think firstly what's key is we have a quick Loom video that we run through the brief for the creators, because I think there's a lot of key information there that was really important that we kind of you know, highlight to them that may sometimes be missed. So a quick video to run them through that just kind of alleviates any potential issues of them missing any of that information. Then we go through like non-negotiables and best practices. So we've found that using at least 3 different locations and outfits is really important. I think it makes the creative more dynamic. Like a lot of the time, static, one location, it's boring in terms of like watch time, you know, it's and kind of hold rate, it's never as good because, you know, you're kind of not, people just, it slows the pacing down in many ways because it's just one location and it's not very exciting. So we asked for at least 3 different locations and outfits from creators to you know, give the idea that this isn't just filmed in one space over the course of an hour. Again, I think what's really key and what we've found that really helps hold rates, we've really been pushing on hold rates recently because from my experience, it's easier to get a strong thumb stop ratio than it is to get a strong hold rate. So cutting every 1 to 2 seconds, again, is really, really important for us. Even if it's like one position where you're not changing the shot necessarily, but you're just jump cutting every second, it's a great way to just really help that pacing. And then again, obviously we talk about kind of safe zones and just best practice checklists, so dimensions, etc., how to explore. Then we go into kind of naming specifically. And then I think this is really important. And this is a lot of the upfront work we do as part of that research doc. So brand expression. So what is the tone of voice? Is there any specific language that they need to be using in their messaging? You know, is there any do's and don'ts of the brand? So anything they should or should not be saying. Then we go a little bit into like the offer and product. So just to give them context of the brand. So, you know, a bit about the brand origin, how the products were made, you know, key brand USPs, product details, and, you know, then what desires does the product cater to? And then we just go straight into the actual deliverables themselves. So we frame it in a very similar way to we do with our framework cards. So then when we're building these out, and we use our framework breakdown, we'll give it specific examples to creatives that have influenced, you know, this brief. And then we will break down that framework. So, you know, we start at different, you know, obviously we'll start with the building the interest, and then we'll kind of go into the solution, the product solution, and, you know, build it out in different ways based on what our framework cards are saying and what the actual ideation has initiated. We then give specifics on the shot type, again, very similar to how our framework cards are laid out. Any specific notes on audio, how long do we want them to be spending on each section? Because again, our creators do edit the videos themselves. So it's really important that we do give some direction there. And then some visual descriptions, which again, we break down any specific shots they need to use, you know, any other direction in terms of how they should shoot things or how they should say things. But then it just gives them, it doesn't put them in a box, and it allows them to like express themselves creatively, you know, as well. And then simply we just go into, you know, we have a narrative checklist and then a technical checklist after that point, once we've kind of broken down the actual frameworks and then specific additional hooks per framework, before then they would send that creative to us.
I love it. Ollie, were you going to jump in there?
Yeah, I know Lucas kind of mentioned a couple of times a couple of things. Lucas obviously mentioned leaning into their creativity. I think that's even more important if you're a brand that's approaching this and hasn't really done UGC at scale before. Like you want to be leaning it, you want to be using their creators again, like cross-sectional learning, their knowledge around how to structure creative. Like we obviously we have greater cross sections, so we kind of push back on that further. But a lot of the brands we come across are trying to apply like TikTok specifically, like meta principles to TikTok and not leading into that entertainment aspect, not allowing that creativity to come through. And I think by just allowing the creator to have a bit more freedom there, you will just get better results. And to touch on the thumb stop versus hold rate element, I think there's a point at which too high a thumb stop is a negative thing. You're attracting too many people and a large subset of those individuals likely have no interest in your product, and therefore it's falsely inflating your data. Then everything beyond that point becomes harder to make sense of because of that higher thumb stop ratio. So you're better to have sort of a 35 to 40% thumb stop ratio, but know that they're people who are perfectly aligned with that persona, perfectly aligned with that pain point, then have sort of 55% plus because you're doing some spammy front end messaging that just gets a load of people to stop. So it's a fine line.
Yeah, it's a tactic I've seen quite a lot recently where, you know, it will be kind of really engaging hook that has no relevance to the actual product, the pain point or the solution or the customer you're trying to speak to, but it's just there to hook the audience. And again, it just shows obviously the importance of speaking directly to that consumer, and that it's not just about getting the highest possible thumb stop.
It makes a ton of sense. And like, ultimately, I want to, especially Ollie, like want to drill into like launching an analysis probably in a couple minutes, but just two quick follow-ups just on the briefing there. One directly, I don't say like right after, but just you've provided a creator with a brief. Loukas, what is like your expectation in terms of going from like version 1 to version final at that point, considering you give people so much freedom?
Yeah, so firstly, obviously, we'll take the creative and we'll analyze that internally. So that will come from the creative strategist. They'll analyze that. They'll kind of link that back to the actual brief itself. We have kind of check boxes that we make sure that we're looking at, you know, from both a technical perspective and a narrative perspective. You know, what's really important is, does it align with the brand? Is it the right tone? You know, we need to make sure there's consistency there across messaging on other channels as well. And then if there is feedback, we'll then feed that, the account manager will feed that directly back to the creators. We're allowed up to 3 rounds of revisions for the creative. Usually we will do one small round internally, and then we'll do an external round of revisions for the client to see as well, and make any final tweaks at that point.
Awesome. And then more broadly speaking, with the creators themselves, how are you typically going about sourcing the appropriate creators for the brands you work with?
So we've like built an extensive creator network. So again, you know, that's come from some creators that we've kind of not built from scratch, but like they hadn't ever been creators before, and we've worked closely with them, we've nurtured them, and again, you know, we find that some of those are our best creators now. I think, you know, we've got a good case where one of Olly's good friends had never made a UGC
That's awesome.
creative life, and then he's now, you know, making one of our best creators and one of the best UGC creators I've ever seen, and does it as a full-time living. So we've built up a really good and extensive creator network. Again, that's broken down by niche. You know, what have they previously done? We give creative scores to them as well, so we do like monthly audits of all of our creative, and then that links back to that database, so we can see the performance of those creators, not the performance specifically, but the quality, because I think it's really hard to judge a creator based on how well a creative performs, because, you know, there's no exact science to what works and doesn't, and a lot of the time the thing that works is what you least expect, you know, despite all of the theory behind it. I think, yeah, so then we obviously we'll go on to that. we'll find the creators that we think are most relevant to that based on the personas. So, you know, I think it's really important to us to find authentic creators that in many ways have suffered from these pain points. Like, we want people to bring in their real stories. You know, that's what makes the best creative. So if we can find creators that are relevant to that niche or relevant to that pain point of it, and it is actually going to be a solution for them, then, you know, that's the best thing for us, really.
I love that so much. The big question I have, like just for my own curiosity, is like, how do you find those people? Is it literally Twitter DMs, or like, where are you going?
Yeah, so we use like multi-platform approaches. So TikTok Creator Marketplace, we use Twitter, which we get a lot from. Obviously our own internal database. We use platforms like Incense as well, so you can put campaigns out there to get loads of creators applying through that. And I think then you slowly just build out your network. So I think what's key though is, you know, it's a good thing to work with creators that have less experience as well, because you normally find by like their third or fourth brand deal that they're actually really, really good. I think, you know, we've kind of got internal training and things that we work with creators on to kind of help push them. So I think, you know, sometimes not looking too deep into how experienced a creator is, if you brief them correctly and you work with them in the right way and direct them well, then you can get good creative out of them.
I love it. Okay, well, we've built our personas. We've gotten to a place of like determining with your frameworks what to make. So it's like actually throwing it against the wall, prioritizing. We've then briefed our creators. So we now holding this asset, and the next thing to do is go live so we can start to make some money for our clients. So Olly, I'll throw this one at you. When you're launching ads live into an ad account, is there a standardized way that you're testing creative in those accounts?
Yeah, from a TikTok perspective, yeah. I think if you're launching into an ad account cold, there's a bit of a warm-up period where you're going to have to get some pixel data on that to begin with, so walk down the funnel. But from a testing creative perspective, I think the key is getting clear data insights that allow you to improve that creative over time. Like, it's rare or it's not unheard of, but it's rare that the first few that you put up are just going to absolutely smash out the park, and you're going to be scaling and adding zeros to your ad account. But the key thing is getting very clear data insights on kind of a creative level, but also more granular than that. So the thumb stop ratio, watch times, CTRs, etc. So we like to isolate our creative tests, somewhat against TikTok's best practice, where they're very much like Meta, like throw everything in an ad set and let us do the work. But we just don't find it spends efficiently across that. We find that it prioritizes sometimes the wrong metrics or soft metrics like engagement, and then when it finds a winner, it finds it really hard to shift money away from that efficiently to give other creatives a chance. That may change over time, but for now, yeah, we like to like isolate, really test against KPIs and benchmark CPAs. So and that'll also often allow you to find different personas and different pain points and different angles that are hitting the KPIs that you're looking for, and then you can scale those multiple angles up and reach higher spend levels, because you're appealing to a wider range of consumers and a bigger audience on the platform. So yeah, isolating, and then obviously using kind of motion and platform data and other platforms to kind of optimize that on a granular level over time.
For sure. And then on your end, like getting that into the account, standardizing the test, just making it TikTok's best practices at that point. How long do you typically wait before making any types of decisions?
So it does vary, obviously, like varies by budget, target CPA.
Yeah.
So like you want to be spending sort of 5x target CPA, I think, to give something a solid chance. Unless you're just putting something in and it just looks horrendous, obviously then cut it. But like you've got to give things a chance to get to statistical significance. Obviously, for TikTok, CPMs are lower, you're gonna get that data quite quickly. And yeah, so it's less of like we don't kind of use a very templated budget by brand, but I think just giving things a fair chance, and then comparing to either what benchmark is in the account or whatever that CPA target is. If it's within like 10% of that, and you can see a really obvious route to optimize that, so maybe it's got like really solid, really poor thumb stop ratio. This is where motion comes in. You maybe have like 10% thumb stop ratio, but then your conversion rate on that piece of creative is 5-6%. Then you come back and we change that hook and we push that out again. And if we can get that hook up to 30% and that conversion rate holds, or even if it comes down by a percentage, then in theory, you're still going to be really hitting KPIs, and there's going to be the ability to scale that concept further. So just isolating, getting that data, and then iterating off that, and really getting into that feedback loop in order to improve things.
The relationship between multiple metrics is always so important to be able to make those types of decisions. So I know every brand's different in terms of when you start jumping in there, but when it comes to the creative analysis at that point, where do you start? Like, does it actually start with top of funnel metrics, or are you actually just saying, okay, low CPA, this is a good one to look at, let's start examining? What's that process look like?
I think obviously, like, the core reason you're running paid is to hit CPA targets, so everything is secondary to that. However, if you can see clear bottlenecks, but there has to be good signs alongside the bad. So it's not like if you've got poor thumb stop ratio, poor watch rate, and poor CPA, then like let's move on from that concept. That's completely fine. That's a good learning. I think it's important whenever you do that to take those learnings back to the front end as well. Like it's good to be like, this isn't working. Let's not just keep trying a concept or an angle or a framework, as we mentioned, that's just not looking like it's going to work. But yeah, if you're within sort of 15, even 20% of that target CPA, and you can start to see those clear areas of improvement, then it's really worth kind of iterating on that concept. I think another area that brands undervalue is I know we're talking very heavily about creative here, but that post-click, that journey beyond that, and how that looks from like a technical setup, like how strong the PDP is, where you're sending that traffic, but also how much continuity there is between those two messages. So like there's a lot of brands that I've seen that will push this angle or this message on the front end, and you'll click through to the website, and where you're sending traffic has zero alignment with this persona or this pain point you're really doubling down with in your creative. I think the real synergy and the real scale, and you'll see a few brands doing this really well, is when you get creative and landing page / post-click experience and offer all working in synergy to appeal to that core demo that you're going after. So some ways you can do that is literally using the same UGC creator on the landing page. I've seen brands do that recently. I haven't seen the numbers behind it, but I imagine if they're spending a lot of money behind that, and that's half their ad library, it's probably working. And it makes sense that that's working. But yeah, it's kind of so many data points come once you get that into that ad account that it's just important to take as many on board as possible.
That cohesiveness is so interesting to me, because basically you could have, let's say we're analyzing a creative, high thumb stop, high hold, high CTR, dream, crushing it. Doesn't work out that way. That's typically like if it was to play out, but then you see a low conversion rate. You might think, okay, my creative is either clickbaity or something's going on with the landing page. So I find that to be super helpful. Loukas, in your world, when it comes to the analysis of like the metrics, how much overlap is there between what Olly had talked about versus what like you and the team are looking at to make changes?
Yeah, so it's really, really important. And again, it was something that we've worked hard on over the last kind of 12 months to get right, in terms of that kind of creative feedback system, making sure that there is really strong communication between the media buyers and then the creative team, because there's no point pulling data if then it's not going to be utilized and optimized for the next brief, next set of briefs. So what we ensure that we do is either weekly or bi-weekly, the media buyer will be pulling a report, looking at key things like obviously the what type of creative is it, so what is it, an unboxing video, is it a skit, etc., etc. The angle, is there an offer in that creative, You know, what is the thumb stock ratio, what is the CVR, you know, watch time, etc. And we'll basically pull best three performers and best three worst three worst performers, because I think it's also really important to, and what many people forget is like the importance of actually analyzing a worst performer, because it's important to then reflect on that and why that is. Because if you don't do that and you're just pulling the best performers, the creative strategist might, you know, they've got no reason then not to run a similar concept the next month. So it's really important that we're pulling that data and understanding it. So then once we put the media buyers have pulled the best three and the best worst, they're then turning that data into tangible creative insights as part of a report that they will then send and run through with the creative strategist. I think what's then really important is the creative strategist uses that information to then build out a strategic plan for the next for that next brief. So within that, you know, we've got a template that we use that goes through key insights from the previous campaign. So like top performing creatives, promising concepts with improvement potential, underperforming creatives, successful angles and hooks, winning creative types, etc. And then we kind of build a strategic direction for that next campaign. So are there any key focus areas, new ideas and opportunities? So then you'd obviously build an ideation list off the back of that. New hooks that you want to potentially test, because again, 80-20 rule, we're obviously wanting to like utilize the data as much as possible, but like anything, you know, it's important to make sure there's a bank of, you know, at least a small bank of, you know, new concepts that you're testing as well. And then I think the one thing as well that's missed quite a lot is like reusing exact concepts again, but with new creators. I think that's something that we're like starting to double down on more. It's like, okay, what if a concept is working really well, why don't we use this exact same concept but with a slightly different creator? Because there's loads of potential there. It's like what I always say to our strategists is, you know, you don't always need to reinvent the wheel, and you know, that's really important as well.
I think just undermining all that as well is like when you first start using kind of cross-sectional industry benchmarks for like what good metrics look like, but as you start to spend and get a pulse on what those look like for your vertical and for your products, like if you've got a niche product, it's going to be different to something that has a massive TAM, like total addressable market. If you're selling something that everybody's interested in, then it's going, your metrics are going to look better than someone who's selling something to 45 plus people in a certain state of America, for example. So yeah, benchmarking, tracking those benchmarks over time and optimizing around those is key as well.
I love it. Okay, everybody, we're coming up on the last 4 minutes here. I have one final question to get in. This recording will be made available, and I think we can also share some information related to trends like top performing hooks that the guys have seen. So being able to pull this in, so everybody got you covered. But the last question that I have, and Lucas, I'll throw it to you, is talking about like those type of changes you can make once you get some data. So there's so many levers you can pull: hooks, holds, CTAs, creators themselves, right? On your end, is there any method to the madness? Like, when are you deciding, is it for a specific like week you tackle the same thing across all accounts, or how are you determining where you should start to look or where you should start to action?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it like really depends. I think what's really important is that you're not like, you know, you're kind of isolating variables, and you're not testing, you know, if you've got a winning concept that you want to potentially test with a new variable, you're not then bringing in loads of different variables, because you want to isolate what is actually working and what's not. So that's, I think, really, really important. So if you've got a winning concept, but then you want to potentially test some new hooks with that to improve TSRs, then that is what you're going to be changing and developing. And then, you know, in terms of that, you know, there's not really an exact science to it, but I think, yeah, that's a really important point. And also that, you know, we kind of we kind of ensure that at least the set deliverables, at least 20% is like completely brand new concepts. From my side, I want at least like 50-60% to be based on, you know, insights from the previous campaign, and then at least some that are also successful concepts that we are then just regurgitating through new creators.
I love it. And then Olly, any insights on your end to share just to end us off here?
Yeah, I think that's the same for that particular question. Same as Loukas. I think there's an element of also setting a roadmap for that testing, like be intentional throughout, not just like hooks and but bigger lever, the whole journey. Don't be changing a landing page at the same time as changing like your hooks and optimizing that side. Really isolate variables. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I know everyone in the audience definitely appreciated the insights. Everybody in the chat, let's show some love to these guys. Absolutely smashed it today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now you both have to jump to another one, but guys, been a pleasure. Everyone, recording will be coming after, and we'll all talk soon, okay?
Thanks for having us on. Cheers.
Guys. Appreciate it.
Guys. Most definitely. Take care.
Bye.